were considered schlockmeisters.
It's schlock, but they sure do make a lot of it.
The name of the game is to do, not just to blah, 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 blah. Talk about it.
You know, there used to be one movie studio that never asked for permission. They didn't even wait for finished scripts or full budgets. They sold movies that barely existed and then dared themselves to make them anyway. And somehow, for a few wild years in the 80s, that all worked. So let's talk about the craziest production stories in the history of Cannon Films. Pop that tape in. I got you. Let's go do this.
Cannon is the only company who loves cinema. Cinema is our life.
Cannon Films presents an outstanding lineup of films for 1986 and beyond. Major filmmakers, major stars, major motion pictures.
So Cannon Films, I absolutely love them. I grew up on them. My dad loved them. My brother, late night cable, late night VHS, tapes worn thin. We didn't see the cracks in the films back then. We didn't pay attention to the unfinished effects, the reused sets, or budgets getting slashed mid-production. We just saw entertainment. We saw explosions, space vampires, arm wrestling championships, the whole America hell yeah action. Cannon Films felt big. They felt bold. They felt like movies made by people who wanted to entertain you at full volume. And whether they meant to or not, that energy helped shape me as a kid and eventually as a filmmaker myself. Because Cannon Films wasn't polished. They were passionate and creative, and sometimes that matters the most.
Mr. Stallone showed up, and he pointed up to Dolph. He goes, "You gave that guy lines?"
This is our fight. I don't want innocent people to die.
But when you talk about Cannon Films, you have to start with Masters of the Universe. Ambition without infrastructure.
Masters was their big shot. They were so excited. They could almost taste the money. They could almost taste the success.
And that's where we start here, because on paper, Masters of the Universe is perfect for Cannon. He-Man was a global toy brand. Fantasy was hot. Conan had worked. Star Wars had proven spectacle sells. And Cannon goes and casts Dolph Lundgren. And they cast Frank Langella as Skeletor. They built massive fantasy sets, went full practical effects, which I love, went big with the score. But here's the problem. Cannon did not have Star Wars money. Mid-production, the financing tightened. I mean, it got cut big time. Scenes were scaled way down. Large portions of the story were taken from Eternia and located here on Earth instead. Not because the script demanded it, because faking Earth on Earth is a hell of a lot cheaper than faking Eternia. And yet, they still, during all of these problems, they had characters we didn't even know. Gwildor. Nobody knew who Gwildor was. They had all kinds of issues going. They had script problems with vegetarian things thrown in to push a vegetarian agenda. Real crazy stuff.
I was trying everything I could to try and make this not look, feel, sound like a Cannon movie.
The solution that Cannon came up with is to paint a skeleton on Frank Langella's face that looked like a Halloween costume that a mother made for her child.
I don't think so. They thought that that picture would play to an adult audience, to a grown-up, but it didn't.
But in the middle of all that, they shot a sequel teaser, which is hilarious. They had no confirmed financing for it, but that's Cannon, always announcing tomorrow before today was even stable.
If it was a great story, if it was funny and moving and exciting, people would have flocked to it.
And because they had announced this big sequel without any money, it led to a disaster which caused a huge emergency pivot in production. The Masters sequel officially collapsed, but Cannon had a crisis because they had already built sets, they had crew contracted, they had some cast that they had already paid, they had time booked. Shutting down would lose way too much money. So instead, they pivoted. They rewrote, rebranded, and reshot.
Welcome to the world of the not-too-distant future. Cyborg.
And that is how Cyborg was born. The post-apocalyptic world of Cyborg was literally built on leftover Masters of the Universe sets and some early constructed sets of a Spider-Man movie that also was never going to happen for Cannon. Jean-Claude Van Damme stepped in. The script was streamlined, almost no dialogue. It was shot fast. It was lean, aggressive, dirty, minimal overhead, and it turned a big profit for Cannon. This was the Cannon model in one story. If the movie collapses, make a different movie immediately and make some money and entertain people. You gotta love that. And then there is Lifeforce, which is an example of ambition that basically broke them. They were chasing prestige horror. They hired Tobe Hooper and gave him a blank check, spent heavily on practical effects, built enormous sets, commissioned a serious orchestral score. The budget ballooned over $20 million. And for context, that's more than the original Star Wars cost to produce at the time. Cannon was not a major studio, but they were spending blockbuster studio money. And the movie opens up with a fully nude space vampire draining souls across London at a excess of Star Wars budget. That's epic. That's also bizarre. It's wildly ambitious, and it's totally Cannon. And it didn't perform well enough to justify the risk. Lifeforce didn't instantly bankrupt Cannon, but it exposed the gap between their ambition and the infrastructure they actually had. And here's the thing, though. As a kid watching the movie, I didn't know or care about any of that. I didn't know it was over budget. It just felt awesome, enormous, felt like something I shouldn't be watching. And you didn't see the accounting, you just saw the creativity and the imagination, and that's the power that Cannon chased with their movies. And when you're chasing power, you go to the top. And in the 80s, there were two people sitting at the top of power when it came to movies, particularly movies like this. That was Stallone and Schwarzenegger. So Cannon took a big swing with Sylvester Stallone.
Lincoln Hawks has a long road to travel.
Welcome to the Arm Wrestling World Championship competition.
He's a man who's never beaten the odds.
And they went over the top with this. And that movie sounds absurd on paper. An arm wrestling drama starring Sylvester Stallone that gets into an action tournament almost a la Rocky. But Cannon believed in it. They tied it to real arm wrestling promotions trying to cross-market the thing. You got Kenny Loggins in on the soundtrack. They genuinely believed they could turn arm wrestling into mainstream pop culture the way he had done with Rocky and boxing. Of course, boxing is already much more mainstream. And they went for it and had Stallone arm wrestling his way to victory and child custody in a great dad-son movie that my dad and I and my brother all watched many times. And you can laugh and think this is a crazy concept, but it's a hell of an entertaining movie. You have to love over the top. And so they double down and go and hold the international distribution for Cobra. And Cobra was pure 80s urban paranoia starring Stallone with night shoots, hyper violence, minimal dialogue, almost horror, but maximum coolness. Stallone rewrote this thing heavily. He clashed with the filmmakers creatively, kept pushing it darker, and Cannon absolutely loved that. They understood something, and that's that excess sells. All right, whether it's excess sex appeal, action, exploitation, whatever, it sells. But here's the risk. Big stars mean big salaries, and Cannon didn't have studio level financing safety nets. So if Stallone movies underperform, it hurt Cannon and it hurt them immediately. But as crazy as that sounds, Stallone movies, which ultimately paid off big for Cannon, so they decided they were going to take a bigger flex and go after one of the biggest names ever, Superman. And they did that with Superman: The Quest for Peace, and went to revive the franchise. They got Christopher Reeve to return. The message was timely, all nuclear disarmament. But halfway through the production, once again, the budget got slashed in half. Major sequences were cut, effects were rushed, whole scenes were abandoned. They had to reuse stuff from other movies. Reeve spoke later about his frustration with the movie. Cannon wanted a blockbuster spectacle, but they were funding it like an independent film, and they just didn't have it, but they sold it like that anyway. It comes out to be a lovable, bad movie, but it was definitely a big hit for Cannon. But that's not the only swing they took in going after prestige. If you look at Bolero, Bo Derek, they were going after prestige romance and drama and those kind of films, lavish international locations, serious artistic ambition. And then the movie was critically demolished. It had scandal, other issues. Cannon wanted to play in the big leagues. They were going after everything. Everything from B movies to huge IPs. They were going after it completely fearless. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but it was always entertaining.
One of my first questions was, how much money do you think you'll be spending on it? And they said, oh, probably $10 million. I think they ended up spending about $3.75 on it.
And then they had their smart plays, their safe plays. You had things like Bloodsport. A lot of people think this is a movie that's a big swing. It's not. This is a standard, just good, solid martial arts action movie, told straight through, nothing big and audacious about it. Of course, maybe some of the backstory was fudged, but it's just a straight line through movie, okay? And then they made money off of stuff like that that kept their other big swings going. That was also the case with Chuck Norris. This was their strategic stuff. Invasion USA, the Delta Force, low to mid-budget, on schedule, clear patriotic branding, Cold War themes that sold internationally. Norris was disciplined, reliable, efficient. The film stabilized the slate because he had that thing that you could count on that you couldn't even with Van Damme at that time. So those movies still were a little bit of a gamble, but the Chuck Norris films stabilized their slate. They weren't chaotic prestige swings. They were controlled action machines like Missing in Action 2, The Beginning, all of these thrown in there.
Everything we got would go in two piles for the two Chucks, Bronson and Norris. It could have been Wuthering Heights. Which one is for Chuck and which one is for the other Chuck?
Cannon may have been reckless at times, but they absolutely understood branding. Chuck Norris became synonymous with their identity, and that partnership brought them time and money to do other things with that weren't so safe.
Sometimes we make better films, sometimes we don't make such good films, but we do make films.
And why does this matter? Because Cannon wasn't incompetent. They were ambitious, sometimes recklessly so, but they believe movies should feel bigger than their budgets, be bigger than their budgets. That's something as an independent filmmaker I have pushed and have preached, is put it in front of the camera. Put every dollar you have in front of the camera. Forget all the other things that make you look like a filmmaker or look like a big studio. Put it there where the people can see it and enjoy it, and let it all be part of the spectacle, and every dollar will stretch further. Cannon believed that. They believed poster art could sell the dream before the dream even existed. And even when they failed loudly. And that loudness, that's part of why 80s action movies felt dangerous, felt awesome, and it's the reason why we still go back to them today, because the people making them were taking real risks financially, creatively, personally. Cannon didn't just make wild movies, they made movies on the edge of collapse, and on that edge you could feel it on screen. That edge of dangerous, that edge of creativity, that edge of passion that gave their movies the edge over the normal, boring stuff, and certainly an edge over anything that is looking to check safety boxes with guardrails today. That's the reason their movies felt so much fun. It wasn't just the explosions, it was the big stakes and creative energy behind the camera. And that is Cannon Films. And if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. That really helps out the channel. We got a lot more deep dives into action coming up here real soon. Some cool lists and a whole lot more. We do all kinds of movies, movie lists, deep dives, essays, filmmaking, all of that here because I love it all. These are just some of the movies that shaped me. And if you want to help support what we're doing here a little bit more, you can join my Patreon. The link is always in the description. You'll get your name and lights on every single video, behind the scenes looks at my filmmaking, special members only videos, and so much more. And I really do appreciate it. But until next time, be kind, rewind like always. This is Chase with AV Pop Culture, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye. Bye now.